Before we start the podcast, I just want to talk to you guys about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and let me explain why. First of all, it's free, so you can get it anywhere, anytime, costs no money. Second of all, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, whatever device you choose. As well as that, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast too with no minimum listenership. That means a nobody podcast like mine can make money off of sponsorships. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So if you haven't tried Anchor or you want to start a podcast and haven't tried it yet, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM to get started.
You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, guys? Welcome to today's episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. We are on episode 10. Finally, 10 episodes in after like a month or two or three of doing this. But now we're on the 10th episode, and unfortunately it's not going to be a big episode because it's just a fight night episode, a fight night recap. But last week's episode, if you want to check that out, was a pretty big one if you haven't already. I got Leo the Lion Kuntz, a UFC vet and MMA vet who's fought in all sorts of organizations, including the UFC and Road FC and stuff like that. I got him on the podcast in the first half of episode 9 last week, interviewed him, talked about some things, picked his brain, found out what happened essentially with the fight between Makachev and him and Bong, and just talked some other things. And it was all in all a really enjoying interview. So I just wanted to thank him for coming on last week and doing that. And just how that happened was, I need a producer for this podcast, so I kind of did that myself. He follows me on Twitter, so I hit him up in the DMs, and he was more than willing to come on the podcast. So once again, big thanks to him. Honestly, it's probably one of my best, for analytic wise, one of my best going podcast episodes. So I got to thank him just big time for that. But anyway, if you want to check that out, go check out last week's episode. This week, we're going to be talking about in the first half of this episode a couple of things like Bellator 247's main event and the Euro Series 9 main events. Just going to quickly gloss over them. I'm probably going to talk about Carlos Condit a lot, but we're going to start off with just this wacky ass shit that's been happening. My brother is big into sports. He's not as big into MMA as I am. He texts me a lot and asks me who he should pick. And then when I do tell him who he should pick, he goes with some of my picks, but he usually goes against the grain for the most part. And somehow this man has accumulated, not from just betting in MMA, but doing NBA betting, I believe. Yeah, NBA betting, NHL betting, and European football betting. Or you want to talk about like soccer. So anyway, he has accumulated, he accumulated over $3,000 or $2,000 or something like that in winnings on across several sites of just him betting. And this weekend, he just showed how, like, he does. I'm just gonna say this for the record. I don't have anything against anybody that has autism or anything like that. This is just a joke, but and he doesn't have autism. But my motherfucking brother is the betting rain man of MMA or just sport betting in general. Because this weekend he chose. Yeah, he chose, I think, a total of 7, I think is what it allows you on DraftKings. 7 fighters for like this one lineup that he was doing, this one draft, like this pool that he was doing on DraftKings. And somehow, I don't know how, but somehow he managed to get every single pick right. The only pick he didn't get right had to have been his pick on Charles Jourdain, which ended up being a majority draw, but he had Jourdain winning. So he kind of got a little less points on that, but nonetheless still got points. But yeah, other than that, that little hiccup at the beginning of the night, he got every single pick right and ended up tying for first with like a couple other people in this like massive, like, I don't know, like 10,000 people pool in this MMA pool, right? So I was like, wow, fuck you, because you're putting me to shame. I'm supposed to be the knowledgeable MMA guy in our family, and you're putting me to shame. Um, but all in all, I thought it was hilarious because this is like an ongoing string of things with him. This isn't the first time he's done something like this. There's been times where he's won like 300 or $400 on bets where he's bet, I don't know, the one soccer match or football match, if you don't want to piss off the Europeans, that happened recently. It was like Bayern Munich against somebody else, some like smaller team. My brother had that smaller, like know nothing team winning, and somehow pulled the win out of his ass. Like that team pulled the win out greatly, and he managed to win fucking like $300-$400 because it was like a plus, like, I don't know, fucking 700 bet or something like that. I'd have to get back to him on that one, but um yeah, this isn't the first time either. He'll do this with a bunch of MMA bets on DraftKings. Like this is the first time he's got every single one right, but most of the time he gets like almost every single one of them right, like me. When I'm doing a pool with him and a couple of buddies, I usually get like, I think it's out of 7 choices, I get 5 of them right, and then 2 of them are wrong, maybe. So he usually does that in those usual pools, but this is the first time he's gotten every single one of them right. But nonetheless, my whole point was that my brother is like, he doesn't have autism, but he is literally like autistic Rain Man of MMA betting or sport betting in general. He just has this weird fucking way of knowing just when to bet on the underdog or when to bet these crazy ass bets, and then it always pays off for him. He doesn't always make these crazy bets either too. Like, people are going to be saying, well, it's easy to just keep throwing throwing shit at the wall and see what sticks. That's not what he does. Like, he'll just see a random bet and he'll be feeling lucky that day, and it always plays off for him. So it's usually a matchup or a sport that he knows a lot about. Like, when it comes to European football or soccer here in North America, he is probably one of the most knowledgeable people I know about that sport. And he could make the craziest bets and probably pull them off. And he probably could make that his full-time job, is just make a little bit of money off the government if he wants, and then like with taxes and stuff, and then throw bets and winnings at retarded ass bets that he knows gonna pull, like, play off, and he's just gonna cash in on that. He's just so weird when it comes to betting. Like, he knows so much or just gets lucky so much that he could literally make that a full-time job. But enough about that. Let's get into the second thing I was going to be talking about, which was the Bellator 247 and the Euro Series 9 main events. So Bellator 247 took place, I believe, in Ireland. I could be wrong. But it was supposed to headline with Paul Daly, not Pod Daly. Fuck me. Paul Daly going against I can't remember the other guy's name. And something Houston, I think. And I think like a day before the fight happened, he had to be hospitalized for something that I don't remember what. But he ended up going to the hospital and he had to be pulled out of the main event, and this fight was scrapped. So we got this like quick main event with Denise Kielholtz going up against who's the lady? I don't remember. But yeah, it was Denise Kielholtz kind of just having another MMA bout in her career, because she's primarily like a boxer and a kickboxer, and she's got incredible striking. and so she stepped up with her bout to save the main event of Bellator 247. Not really much of a big like CBS sports debuting pay-per-view, but it's okay. They can let it slide. It's Bellator. They don't. And nobody expects like amazing cards from Bellator. But anyway, talking about the main event for that, Denise Kielholtz actually ended up coming out with a brutal KO. And honestly, congrats to her. She's showing more and more that she belongs here, and that her power withstands probably all other skills in MMA. Um, but this was not the only event that Bellator put on this weekend. So that being said, it was Thursday that Bellator 247 happened. And then on Saturday afternoon my time, because it'd be around evening, nighttime their time, because it was in Milan. They had another Euro Series event where they just Bellator 247, pretty self-explanatory. It's a main event from them. It was supposed to be a bigger headline, but obviously, like I said, Paul Daly got hospitalized. He had to be pulled out, unfortunately. But Euro Series, on the other hand, it's almost like a fight night, but it's like a contender series, actually. That'd be the better way of putting it. Not people getting contracts, but just more of a showcase to show their European fighters, to kind of get them more notoriety within their European markets. Because the thing is, Bellator has probably the American market by the nuts. Second hand to UFC, obviously. They're sitting there waiting for UFC to drop the nuts so they can grab them. But in Europe, they are pretty much toe to toe with ONE FC. You know, ONE FC has the Asian market. Bellator is crushing the European market. They have tons of events over there. They're going toe to toe with promotions like Cage Warriors and ACA and shit like that, man. They are putting on great shows with the European fighters. But the thing is, it's because all they do is sign great European talent. So Euro Series 9 had an awesome main event, which was wannabe Conor McGregor from Wish, James Gallagher, the man I fucking hate. But he's a good fighter, so I won't discredit him. You guys know me. I can hate a fighter, but I will never, ever in my life or in my podcasting career that is so slowly blossoming. I will never discredit a fighter because obviously I'm just a fan and I do a little bit of training here and there, but I could never go toe to toe with anyone in that fucking cage, and I can admit it. So I'm never going to discredit someone as much as I fucking hate them. I'll talk about how their technique will be sloppy, but I'll never discredit them because I'll always put that out there and say, yeah, I'll never beat these guys up, but they're pretty shit in terms of professional fighter standards, right? But I fucking hate this guy, and I'm just going to constantly fucking say that because he's like Conor McGregor on Wish, but if Conor McGregor had no fucking charisma and you wanted to just slap the shit out of Conor McGregor when he was a kid, that type of shit. But he was going up against a very tall, I believe bantamweight or featherweight. I think they're bantamweight. Cal Eleanor, who's like 6 feet tall. And I had Cal Eleanor winning this by KO Ricky Bandejas style. That didn't happen. That did not fucking happen at all. It started out on the feet as all fights do, but James Gallagher, they were pushing the pace, both of them, and James Gallagher was closing the pocket, forcing Eleanor to strike. But a lot of people who really, really know James Gallagher's career would have expected, he went for the double leg takedown, got to the ground, and that was the end of it, really. It was just a ground performance from here on out. It was just James Gallagher transitioning constantly, making Cal Eleanor panic on the ground. And it got to the point where he managed to take Cal Eleanor's back and sink in a choke. And after he got the back and started trying the choke, it was literally just a matter of time of when he was going to sink the choke in. It looked like I was so embarrassed with my choice because after I seen how Cal Eleanor operates on the ground, it was It was embarrassing. That's all I'm going to say. It was embarrassing. It was like a black belt going up against a white belt that just stepped into the gym for the very first day. Like they just got their white belt that day because they joined. That type of shit. Like it's like a person who's gotten like a couple stripes on their black belt. Like they're like a 3-stripe black belt, a 3rd-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And this person is just a starting out white belt. And it was just a complete domination on the ground for James Gallagher. So he ended up getting the rear naked choke submission within like the first round and ended up, continuing his winning streak. And honestly, what's next for him? I want to see him up against Ricky Bandejas again. I just want to see him get knocked out. That's the only reason why. I'm just going to be completely honest with you guys. I want to see him get knocked out by Ricky Bandejas again. So that's why I say he should go up against the guy again. But that's besides the point. Before I get into the main card, the main attraction, the one that you guys want to come here for the podcast for, the fight night that happened, I want to talk about a fight that happened on the fight night. It was the headliner for the prelims, and it actually had one of my favorite fighters, Carlos Condit, going up against an absolute brawler and a tough guy through and through, Court McGee. And it delivered just about how I expected, except it wasn't as explosive because they were both being technical, but they both threw as much as I thought they did. They were both hitting each other with hard shots. Both of them showed their toughness. Carlos Condit, though, looked amazing. It's like a rejuvenated Carlos Condit. His movement was incredible on the feet. He was constantly, like, his head movement was incredible. He was constantly moving, so he wasn't on the center line. His footwork was awesome. He was constantly switching stances, and he was keeping Court McGee guessing. Yeah, he was getting caught with a couple shots, but he was constantly switching his stance and closing the pocket and making Court McGee guess where he's going, whether it's going to be a inside the pocket hook or if he's going for the body or if he's going to go for a leg kick. And the cool thing about it was no takedowns were attempted, despite Court McGee usually kind of employing that wrestling style when he's in trouble there. And Carlos Condit being a submission wrestler, as much of a Thai boxer as he is. And it was awesome to see neither of them go for any takedowns. But one of the big talking points of the fight was at the end of the first round. It was like Carlos Condit just completely woke up. The first round looked great for Carlos Condit, but it was more like a slow Carlos Condit. Like he was trying to get his pace. He was trying to see where this fight was going, how it was going to go. And closing seconds, like I want to say the last 3 or 2 seconds, he just hits Court McGee with this nice right hook that just slams right bam on the fucking button, right on Court McGee's nose, and drops him on his ass. And then the bell rings. And you don't see it at the time, but the commentators are talking about it. They're like, oh, look at Court McGee's nose. And you're like, what are you talking about? As soon as the camera pans to Court McGee and he faces that camera, you can see it. His nose is almost completely flattened. The bridge or whatever, the cartilage or whatever it is that reaches up to the bone, that's the bridge or whatever, it's like completely on the other side. Like I want to say the right side of his face. It'd be the left side on the camera, but right side on his face because, it's his view, right? But yeah, no, it was completely flattened from just one big hook that landed from Carlos Condit. So after that, it was almost like Carlos Condit smelt blood in the water. And that's just kind of how he fights. Once he senses that a person is hurt or a person is cut with a very fight-ending cut, he will just attack it. He will go for that finish. But the thing is, I like how Carlos Condit fought this time. He didn't get sloppy with it, although I would have liked old Carlos Condit to come back and just completely fucking run through him. But he wasn't sloppy with trying to go for the finish. He was hitting nice combos, and then every time Court McGee would get out of range or Court McGee would have his guard up, he'd wait. He'd wait, and he'd keep moving back and forth, side to side, constantly keeping his head moving, trying to bait Court McGee to, drop those hands and strike with him, and so he can open up. And he was just doing a really good job with picking his shots all fight. And it was just really nice to see a veteran like him, like Carlos Condit, and a fan favorite for the most part. For a little bit more hardcore fans, like diehard fans, he is a absolute fan favorite, and the MMA community loves Carlos Condit. So to see him fight the way he did last night was awesome. Just in my opinion. So what would be next for Carlos Condit? Because he just beat Court McGee handily. He beat Court McGee handily. So I think he could have a chance fighting some of the guys at top 15, maybe. Whether he can be in the top 10 conversation is a different story. I didn't see too much from Carlos Condit. I see a rejuvenated Carlos Condit. So he could probably bang with the people close to the top 15, or, people in the top 15, and he could get himself back in there. But he still needs to, get that mojo going for himself to be able to kind of stand and bang with some of the people at top 10, because I'm pretty sure he's a welterweight. And I've said it before on the podcast talking about the welterweight division. It is one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC and probably all of MMA out of every promotion. And with that, it's really hard to make matchups because there's so many killers. There's so many great skilled guys that deserve matchups. So it's really hard to make matchups. I'm not going to give a specific matchup for Carlos Condit, but I personally think maybe give him another unranked guy who's out of the top 15, or maybe give him number 15 to see if he can handle it. And if he can't, then obviously keep him with the unranked guys. Don't push him too hard. But I personally think give him another unranked guy, see if he can stand that way, see if he fights just like that or even better. And then, then try giving him a top 15 guy. It could be it could be number 15, or it could be, 13, 14, but don't rush Carlos Condit, let him get back into his mojo. He was just on a 5-fight losing streak. The last time he won a fight was 2015, and that was a number 1 contender fight for a shot at Robbie Lawler. The last time he and I guess some people would say the last time he won was 2016, but yeah, the last time he fought for a title was 2016 against Robbie Lawler, and things have changed drastically in the welterweight division since then, and he has done nothing but go on a 4-fight losing streak after that title loss. So this is his first win back. Congratulations to him. I love seeing this shit, but to ask what is next for Carlos Condit, like I said, I think personally we should go with another unranked guy. Maybe if Diego Sanchez wants a fight to go out on, it's gonna be a violent fight, but we love violent fights. And maybe give Carlos Condit Diego Sanchez, because that's another thing I want to talk about real quickly before we get into the next half. But before I get into that, I'm going to finish my thoughts on Carlos Condit up. He looked amazing. I think give him another unranked guy. If he can stand with one of the younger unranked guys, then put him in the top 15 conversation, put him up against a top 15 guy, see if he can, stand and bang. Just try to get him to get his mojo back. And it's honestly great to see him back in the win column. He's a fan favorite. The entire MMA community loves Carlos, and he's just such a good guy. And I can't wait to see what's next for him, but I don't want to see him rushed. That being said, there was big news last week regarding Conor McGregor. Yeah, there was big news last week regarding Conor McGregor and Dana White. So Conor had released some images, some DMs, and he had been asking for Diego Sanchez for a while since his Cowboy fight. Because if you guys don't remember, when he fought Cowboy and won against Cowboy, he said he was going to do a season. He was going to have all of his fights lined out for himself so he could do them as they go. Ow, my elbow. Just hit my elbow there, so ignore that. But he had them lined out, so it was like a season. That was his term of the season, right? But as the DM showed, he could not, COVID kind of put a stop to that, and he couldn't put any deals together. But before COVID happened, he was asking for Diego Sanchez. And even though I just said give Carlos Condit Diego Sanchez, maybe, I think that's more of a better, more competitive fight for Diego than people think, compared to Conor McGregor, who's still young in his prime. He's fresh. He's off that win from Donald Cerrone. He's still a rising star. And yeah, it would be the money fight for Diego, but how badly do you want to see Diego get fucking brutalized by Conor McGregor? Maybe years ago when Diego wasn't over the hill and, believing in this crazy Josh Fabian bullshit, then yeah, I would have said, yeah, let's put Diego Sanchez to work against Conor McGregor. I think he could have a chance. But now I just think he's slowing down, especially after last week's matchup against Jake Matthews. It really upset me seeing him in the octagon because he used to be utterly fucking shredded at welterweight, like built. I'm talking like Arnold level built. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but he was fucking shredded at welterweight. And then just last weekend, man, he came in looking like dad bod to the max, like Ben Askren. But Ben Askren at least had that bod throughout his entire career. And then going into the fight, he just didn't look like Diego. It was an easy fight for Jake Matthews, and I think give Diego a tiny bit of a more competitive fight. Don't throw him to Conor McGregor. I think there's other fights out there for McGregor to take. I heard talks about him versus Pacquiao, but now there's this talk about him versus Dustin Poirier in a charity match, and I'm all for it because Conor even said all my proceeds and all the proceeds from the fight are going to go to the Good Fight Foundation because I love the shit that you're doing with it. And honestly, that is probably one of the best things that Conor can do. I know it's him trying to fix his image because he's looking bad right now and stuff. He could be doing this for publicity, but I don't care because even if it's benefiting Conor, the money is still going to Dustin Poirier's organization. And I know for a goddamn fact that Dustin Poirier is going to put that money to damn good use like he always does. He's auctioned off his fight equipment. He's raised money from events he's held before. And he's put that all together to get more advanced reading programs for underprivileged schools in Louisiana. He built a playground for an underprivileged broke school that didn't have one in Lafayette, I believe. He's done a lot just for underprivileged kids in Louisiana alone. And I'm all for that fucking charity match. But Conor McGregor needs to stop picking on guys who are over the hill. He just beat a kind of starting to go over the hill Donald Cerrone. And I'll say it. I don't care. I'll say it. He looked good against Nico Price, but he got lucky surviving that onslaught by Nico Price. And he's lucky that Nico Price didn't properly manage his stamina, because had he not survived that onslaught, there would be no Donald Cowboy Cerrone questions. I think he should take a retirement fight against one of the guys. Maybe even put him against Diego, man. Maybe put Donald Cerrone against Diego on a main card of a pay-per-view or something. Just don't throw Diego Sanchez to Conor McGregor. Give Conor McGregor an actual competitive matchup. You just gave Conor an easy matchup in Cowboy. That was an easy one. Everyone saw how that was going with with Cowboy being on a losing streak and a lot of them being TKOs. It was obvious where this was going to go with a guy like Conor McGregor. So don't throw Diego Sanchez to Conor McGregor. I'm even a little iffy about throwing him to Carlos Condit, but Donald Cerrone, if you want both of them to retire, do that. Do that. Winner or loser retires, winner gets a couple more fights, maybe. I don't know. But that would be a good competitive fight for both guys. It wouldn't put Diego too much to shame, and it wouldn't put Cowboy too much to shame. It would be perfect for both guys. They're starting to get over the hill now. Cowboy's taken enough damage in his career. It's starting to get to that point now, and so is Diego. And the thing is, both guys have done incredible shit with their careers. So it's like, I don't personally care how that one ends as long as both guys end to respect each other and a retirement happens. Because, like I said, I think Diego should retire and I think Cowboy should retire. But if Diego wants a big red panty night, I think do a nice overly promoted fight night for him and Cerrone to go up against each other in a five round main event or something. I don't know. It might be something that, you know, super picky MMA fans are going to call, oh, well, that's a Bellator main event, but I don't care. I would love to see that. It'd be a great matchup, and it would be a perfect matchup for both Donald and Diego. So, anyway, that's it for Carlos Condit and the whole situation with Conor McGregor and Diego Sanchez and Dana White. I was going to get more into that, but I don't particularly care about what Conor and Dana White are bitching about and arguing about unless he's shafting Conor with pay. I really don't give a fuck about that. What I cared about was that Conor called out Diego, trying to mask it as oh, I'll give you a red panty night, which sounds nice in the long run, but how quickly that would be and how brutal that would be. You just have to think about that. And you got to think about Diego's health after his career. So give him a nice retirement fight that won't give him a fucking concussion that will put him out to sleep in like 13 seconds or something. Give him a fight that will give him a good legacy, make it competitive, and give fans a good show. And just make all guys feel good. But anyway, we'll get into the actual main card in the next half. There's a lot of shit I got to talk about. I'll see you guys then. And we're back. So we're going to be talking about UFC Fight Island 4 as it is dubbed, but it's actually UFC Fight Night. Holly Holm versus Irene Aldana. And this was a good bantamweight fight because this essentially two fights on this card were women's bantamweight fights. Both were just kind of setting each other up, I guess you could put it. We had Jermaine Durandamy going up against Juliana Pena and Holly Holm versus Irina Aldana. And both women. So Holly Holm is ranked number 2 in the rankings in the world right now. Irina Aldana is ranked 6, and they were main eventing. Jermaine Durandamy, GDR, is ranked number 1, and Juliana Pena was ranked number 4. So whoever won their fights, I feel, should have been going up against each other. So we'll get into that. Whoever was the winner of those fights, like I said, should be going up against each other for like a number 1 contender spot, considering that I believe Amanda Nunes is now defending her title against another featherweight contender, I believe, or something like that. We could potentially have that room to do that, to have that number 1 contender fight. Obviously, it could potentially be against the two same people over again, and then obviously whoever wins, it's going to be the same person, same result, because Amanda Nunes is dominated, everybody. But let's be honest, this is perfect for a matchmaker. This type of card is good for a matchmaker in the long run if you're going to go by the rankings and who wins what, right? So anyway, to start off with the card, we had a middleweight showdown between Dusko Todorovic, I believe, Todorovic, something like that. It was some Serbian name. He was an undefeated fighter going up against a MMA veteran and UFC a starter guy in the UFC. He's had a couple of fights now, Daquan Townsend, and this fight was pretty explosive. It came out. Both guys were throwing leather, like throwing intense leather. Obviously, it was mostly Todorovic pushing forward and throwing the leather. But the thing is, Daquan Townsend was doing really good with moving his head and just keeping his guard up and just absorbing those punches on the arms and trying to tire out Todorovic. And every time there would be an opening, Daquan Townsend would hit these nice heavy punches, these nice counter punches that would send Todorovic kind of backing up. But it wouldn't last long because it showcased a lot of good work from Todorovic, where he would push him up against the cage as soon as he would get backed up and, take that leather. And it was mostly an against the cage affair. Both guys were just throwing leather. That's all I can really say. Like, both guys were just throwing leather in the first round. And then it wasn't until near the end, Todorovic went for a takedown, I believe. Or no, No, it ended with them on the feet against the cage. And then in the second round going in, it was the same story, same song and dance. Um, they were throwing hands, and Todorovic had Daquan Townsend up against the cage. And it was just a clinch affair from there on. But it was nice, heavy punches from the clinch that were clearly kind of hurting Townsend. And then even the commentators last night said the same thing, that it was such a veteran move of Todorovic to do. He goes for the double leg, lifts Townsend up, and instead of sitting him butt first down against the cage, he moves, like he swings his body away from the cage and takes down Townsend toward the middle so he can get his grappling work in. And then once that takedown landed, it was game over for Townsend. No submission, but it was just ground and pound from there. Daquan Townsend was clearly, you could see he was clearly trying to get up, but he was struggling to get to his feet. It started off in full guard, and then a tiny little scramble where Todorovic went from half guard immediately to top mount without even seeing him land in a half guard fully. And from there on out, once he had top mount or full mount, it was done. He just started raining down shots, and it was pretty much just Daquan Townsend constantly rolling around trying to get out of the way of the punches, and just Todorovic flattening him out and just doing exactly that. It was fun to watch, and it was a great performance for Todorovic, and he moves to 10-0 against Daquan Townsend. I thought Daquan Townsend was going to win because I thought, they're giving the newcomer undefeated fighter a veteran. He's got the experience, he's got this, but Todorovic used his wrestling and just completely dominated it once it got to the ground. It was a little bit more equal on the feet despite Todorovic pushing the pace against the cage, but once it got to the ground, it was over. Todorovic showed that he was the much more dominant fighter on the ground and just took him out, just completely took him out. But that is a similar story to our next fight that we're going to be talking about, which was a bantamweight clash between Kyler Phillips from the US of motherfucking A against Cameron Else. This, I thought Cameron Else was going to have a chance in. And the reason why I'm going to be talking about this is because I'm probably going to be talking about one guy in the fight for way too long. But let's just get into this fight. So it's a bantamweight contest. These two, for the most part, newcomers to the UFC, surprisingly on a main card. Like I said, I should have said this earlier in the podcast, but I think, despite it being the headline for the ESPN prelims, I thought that Carlos Condit should have been a main card feature on this fight card. It should have been a main card fight, even a co-main, right? So anyway, Kyler Phillips versus Cameron Else. It started out pretty fun, pretty even on the feet. It was a striking affair for probably half of the round, I'd say. And it was a really good striking affair, but Kyler Phillips pushed the pace more, used his striking a little bit more successfully. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the round, Kyler Phillips lands a double leg takedown. And then the story of the fight just completely changes. Similar to last fight that I just talked about, the story of the fight completely changes. But the reason why I didn't talk too much about Dusko Todorovic was not because of it wasn't too dominant. It's just it was more of like a last second, not Hail Mary, but a last second idea where he was against the cage doing his work that he was doing in the beginning that was winning him the rounds, and then he just went for a takedown, and then he started showing his dominant wrestling. Kyler Phillips, after that half round of striking, it was clear what his game plan was. He came to play, and just like Daquan Townsend, it was like these two were just from a completely different dimension. Kyler Phillips would just completely maintain the full mount posture for the entirety of the first round, raining down punches while Cameron Else was just scrambling and rolling, causing Kyler Phillips to take his back every now and then and that type of shit. And all in all, it was just a a fun fight just to watch on the ground. You know how most fights on the ground are not fun, but sometimes they are fun because of, crazy submissions. Well, this is one of those times that it's fun because it's just pure violence on the ground, and I love it. And that is exactly what it was for the entire half of the round. Cameron Else survived to the bell, and then it was clear that he was getting a little bit tired. And I thought Kyler Phillips was getting tired from his ground game antics, but no, he wasn't. Start of the second round, it just goes exactly how you think it was. Let me go before we get into the second round. Going into the second round, so the bell going off at the end of the first, Cameron Else was dazed. He was getting up. He seemed very labored getting up. It was clear he was still hurt from the elbows and the shots that he was eating coming to the end of the first round. So like I said, going into the second round, it was clear what game plan Kyler Phillips had. This guy is 25, by the way. And the way he just performed against a 30-year-old 15-fight veteran just amazed me. He went in and pushed the pace immediately, pushed Cameron Else against the cage, dominated him against the cage, and then like with no resistance, just tripped him down to the ground so he had full guard, and then continued his plan from last round. Just went in with the power punches, just pounding, ground and pound constantly over and over and over and over and over again. And it was just a beat down for 44 seconds until finally the ref just stepped in. And it was clear going into the second round that there was a reason why there was no resistance to the takedown. And it was because Cameron Else was still kind of hurt, and Kyler Phillips capitalized on that. He did an incredible job. He made it look easy is what I'm saying. He made Cameron Else look like an amateur compared to him in there. And I cannot wait to see Kyler Phillips against some killers in the bantamweight division, because I don't say this often, but I love watching the little guys fight. And when it comes to bantamweights, that division is completely stacked full of utter killers from all walks of life, all walks of skill sets, submissions, wrestling, kickboxing, regular boxing, Muay Thai clinch, you name it, man. They have different skill sets, and they're killers with those skill sets. They have power. They're like flyweights, but they'll knock you out in a couple seconds. It's crazy. So I cannot wait to see where Kyler Phillips is going next. Obviously, give him another unranked guy. I'm not saying rush him, but I'm excited to see when he's going up next. He did scream at the end of the fight that he wants another matchup on Fight Island. So I personally expect to see him on one of these upcoming cards in the next couple of weeks, and the rest of October. The rest of the time that they're in Abu Dhabi, essentially. I'm essentially feeling he might end up being a replacement for a fight, or they might end up giving him a fight on a card last moment, and he might end up getting his wish. But I'm expecting him to fight sometime during this 5-week period, or now it's 4 weeks now. Well, I mean, going into tomorrow as of recording this, which it's Sunday. So going Monday, it'll be 3 weeks. But yeah, their whole 5-week period, I feel like he's going to fight again at some point. And if not, he's going to get a fight immediately going back stateside, I feel like. So I'm looking forward to seeing him fight again soon. He made that fight look easy. He took little to no damage during it, and just showed why he deserves to be in this despite being 25 years old. There's a reason why he's only got one loss on his record and he's still surging. He looked incredible out there. And like I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, I want to get other interviews on the podcast. I want to get other people like Leo on the podcast. He's definitely a guy I want to get on the podcast. He seems very down to earth, very high energy, very talented, and I want to watch this guy's surging career. Mark my words, this guy, if built and developed correctly and doesn't take the Sean O'Malley route, can be a killer in this bantamweight division. He can be in the top 15 within the year, killing these guys. So I cannot wait to see what's next for Kyler Phillips. But going into the next fight is something I really want to talk about, because it was GDR versus Juliana Pena, and may I say, it ended in a way I did not fucking expect. So GDR, for those who do not know, is primarily a kickboxer. She came from Dutch kickboxing background. She was a professional Dutch kickboxer, and then she transitioned to MMA. Her career wasn't the best, despite having a 10-4 record. She challenged for the title a couple times. She was the former featherweight champion, but her ground game wasn't anything to scoff at. It was garbage, utter trash. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys didn't catch her last bout yeah. No, if you didn't catch her last bout against Amanda Nunes, she actually showcased that she has some ground game, that she's starting to develop her ground game. And boy, did she show how fucking far she has come as a fighter in this fight. She showed that she can stand and bang with Juliana Pena. She was making Juliana Pena miss every fucking shot and make her pay every time she missed. When it got to the ground, obviously she wasn't the best at defending takedowns, but once it got to the ground, all of a sudden it was just like showing that she was dangerous on the ground and that she could threaten submissions. I don't believe Germaine de Randamie has any submissions, and if she does, it was very early in her regional circuit career, like in her amateur years, pretty much. So this was exciting and awesome to see. At one point, she was stuck in a choke where she had rolled and reversed Juliana Pena over, where Juliana Pena was on her back and she was on top in a choke. But the way she had her arms positioned for a Von Flue choke, and she threatened that near the end of the second round. So it was like a little bit of a glimpse that she had a ground game. It was exciting to see. It was like, wow, GDR actually has a fucking ground game. This is awesome. So all of a sudden, we're going to the third round, and it's the same story, same song and dance. They're striking. Juliana Penn is making Germaine de Randamie pay now, though. This is a different thing. She's got Germaine de Randamie up against the cage. She's hitting her with a bunch of flurries of strikes, and then she takes Germaine de Randamie down. Like, it goes up against the cage, and they're fighting against the cage for a bit, and then she shoots for a takedown. She gets the takedown, but as she shoots for the takedown, if some of you don't know, I mean, a lot of fans understand why it's dangerous to shoot for a takedown, but some people are good at it. It's because you could open up your neck. And that's exactly what she did. And Germaine de Randamie capitalized on that and out of nowhere locked in a fucking guillotine submission and just started squeezing and had Juliana Pena in this weird position where she couldn't exactly tap, or it was like almost an immediate reaction where she went to sleep. It was clear she went to sleep. And this is where it's going to bring me to my next topic. Not going to be a long one. Not going to rant about it because I got a lot to talk about matchups after this event. But not a lot to talk about, but just wanted to say that was a little late on Jason Herzog's, defense there, where he had to check that Juliana Pena was out, but I believe she was out immediately after the bell had, or after the choke had sunk. You could see she was fighting it for like a tiny bit, then stopped, and then for like a good 5 seconds, it was until he finally checked her arm, and then like 7-8 seconds in of her being still choked out and being denied access of blood to her brain and oxygen to her brain. That was when he finally fucking decided, she's out, let go. But nonetheless, nothing to take away from GDR. That was an awesome performance, a great performance from GDR. She showed how complete of a fighter she is becoming, and it's making me all giddy and happy to see. I used to not like her because of how she beat Holly Holm for the featherweight strap, but she's becoming a fighter I'm really rooting for, and I cannot wait to see her become a much more complete fighter. She is very dangerous as is. She's got incredibly precise striking and power out the wazoo. And now that she's starting to get a little bit of a more complete ground game, she's going to become dangerous. And she gave Amanda Nunes in her last bout everything that she could handle in it. So I'm excited to see what's next. But we're going to move on to our next fight. It's the co-main event, a big boys fight, a heavyweight fight between Yorgan De Castro and Carlos Felipe. This didn't go exactly the way I planned. And I'm gonna be brief about this one because this one made me sad. I had Yorgan De Castro winning the whole time. Carlos Felipe is a killer. Don't get me wrong, but the way that Carlos Felipe beat Yorgan De Castro made me so sad. It's it was almost as sad as the main event, and I'll get to that in a bit. But Yorgan De Castro started off the fight doing pretty good. He was landing some good shots. Both guys were going back and forth the first round. Honestly, I could tell it was a little bit of Carlos Felipe's round, but it was easily could have been argued towards Yorgan De Castro. Both guys were pushing the pace, throwing their leather, throwing heavy shots that could have put each other out. They were both getting hit with shots and showing that they can withstand these shots. It was nuts. But for the most part, it was Carlos Felipe that was getting Yorgan De Castro against the cage and just pushing the pace more. So that's why I think it was Carlos Felipe's round. But then after the first round, that's when the fight started to slow down on Yorgan De Castro's end. Carlos Felipe was pushing up the pace with the striking, hitting Yorgan De Castro with all these types of combos, got him into some clinch positions where he was hitting him hard and just was really tiring out Yorgan De Castro. And then going into the third, where both boys were tired, it really just left Yorgan De Castro with nothing but just clinch, like just push him against the cage and hope to God you can hold him there and rest, because there's nothing you can do at this point. It was insane what Carlos Felipe was doing, but honestly, like, big ups to Carlos Felipe. He showed that he is definitely a killer in this heavyweight division, and I cannot wait to see where he goes next with that. We'll get into that in a bit, though, because what we're about to get into is the main event of the evening, the one that has pretty much number one contender speculations behind it, I personally think. The 5-round main event between Holly Holm and Irina Aldana. Aldana hasn't fought since December of last year because she's been facing a number of injuries, and, that's okay. There could be some ring rust there, but she has completely derailed so many hype trains. She is on a win streak right now. She is a complete killer. She knocked out Caitlin Vieira in her last fight. So it was exciting to finally see her reach the octagon again. And I had her winning, but in the other corner against her was Holly Holm, the fucking preacher's daughter, the woman who derailed the Ronda Rousey. Jesus Christ, give me a second. The Ronda Rousey hype train. Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. I'm just so excited because these fights kind of delivered despite being a much, much lesser card. It's definitely not one where I would have said, you shouldn't have missed it. But, for a fight fan like me, I was like, oh, yeah, this is great. These are good fights. I love watching these. But these two women went to war. But what happened was nothing that I expected. And I should have expected it, considering Holly Holm, and she is probably one of the best women kickboxers out there. She just made it a 5-round striking and grappling clinic with Irina Aldana and just beat the brakes off of Irina Aldana. And don't get me wrong, I like Holly Holm winning and all, but it's starting to get boring seeing Holly Holm get all these title shots. And that's why I was so upset, because I wanted to see a new contender in the bantamweight division. But ultimately, Holly Holm is just like Germaine de Randamie. She's becoming way too much of a more complete fighter. She's a great kickboxer with power behind her and incredible precision. Like, I gotta say, probably some of the best precision out of women's boxing that I've seen. And she, Irina Aldana is an incredible boxer, but she's nothing to hold a candle to Holly Holm. And I have to realize that. I can't let that, I want to see a new contender in the limelight, blind me, right? So, for the most part, I was upset, and I say I shouldn't, I didn't expect this, but I should have. And it was a complete 5-round clinic of Holly Holm just dominating Irina Aldana. Now, it wasn't super dominative. Like, it wasn't to the point where on all global scorecards it was 50-45, but it was 50-45 on the judges' scorecards because it was pretty dominant, and it was all Holly Holm easy. And honestly, I think Irina Aldana just needs a couple more fights in her. She needs to shake off that ring rust. I think a little bit had to do with not only Holly Holm being too much and being too skilled for her, but I think Irina Aldana just had a little bit of ring rust on her. She just needs to shake that off and get back into the groove of things, right? She'd been facing all these injuries. She's finally getting back into it. get back to work and just get back to that groove. I still have this gnawing chance where I feel like she's going to get into the contender position, but just right now, just have a couple more fights and get back into that groove. But anyway, that leads us to where the matchups are going to be. Frankly, I'm just going to talk about the last 3 fights that we talked about, the co-main event, the featured fight, and the main event. Starting with the main event and the featured fight, because the 2 of them, all 4 of them could actually go into each other. That being said, Germaine de Randamie has showed completely that she is an incredible fighter. And I think she's just exactly like Holm. She's just developing in so many ways. And I think personally, I think the 2 of them should go up against each other again. I think a rematch is well overdue. I don't know about you, but if any of you guys watched that fight, I think a rematch is well overdue. That being said, I can't wait to see what they're going to be doing. I think personally that they should put Germaine de Randamie and Holly Holm against each other for the number 1 contender spot to go up against Amanda Nunes again in a 5-round fight on a fight night, maybe in Vegas, maybe on Fight Island if they come back before the Nunes fight. Do that rematch, because there's a story behind it. They fought for the title before. Everybody thought that Germaine de Randamie lost, and that Holly Holm won, because a lot of people thought that Germaine de Randamie should have been penalized for the late blows, the several late blows that she landed against Holly Holm that ended up ultimately leading to her getting a more dominant finish at the end of the fight. She didn't end up actually finishing Holly Holm. I'm just saying, like, the end of the fight looked better for her, and that was the reason why. So the story is there. You could promote that, and the title implications are there. It's the number 1 contender fight. We've got number 1 versus number 2. Germaine de Randamie just won. She's not going anywhere, and she's ranked number 1. Holly Holm just won. She's not going anywhere. She's ranked number 2. Put them against each other. A true number 1 contender matchup. I would love to see that. A rematch. It's got the story behind it. And then for Irina Aldana, I think Juliana Pena would be a great fight for her. They have not fought before. They're close to each other in ranking. Juliana Pena is like rank 4, but she might be going down, and so Irina Aldana. They're both on they're on a loss now, so they could fight each other, get back in that win column. Who's gonna come out on top? So those are 2 fights specifically to make, but there is one fight in the heavyweight division I want to see, and that is Carlos Felipe versus Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa is a monster. He's an exciting fighter, great clinch fighter, has absolute power. And Carlos Felipe is quick, powerful, great with clinch. These 2 guys would go to war. And the thing is, Carlos Felipe just loves to fight. And watching his fight against Yorgan De Castro last night actually made me happy and made me a fan because of how much he was just enjoying himself in there. It was just making me smile. So those 2 guys going against each other, 2 guys that just love to be in the cage and just love to fight, put them against each other on a card. I'm not saying anytime soon. Maybe, I don't know, near the end of November, December time, do that. But definitely a matchup to make, because those 2 guys, they have similar skill sets. They love to brawl. They have power, and they're definitely guaranteed to go to war every single time. But tough luck to Yorgan De Castro. I don't know. Give him somebody to get back into the win column against. There's a couple of guys who've made their way off of Dana White's Contender Series. Put him up against one of those guys maybe. But definitely want to see Carlos Felipe versus Tai Tuivasa now, especially after that fight. The commentators were talking about it, and when I heard about it, it really piqued my interest. I was like, yeah, that actually sounds like a really fun fight. And the more that I think about it, it's great for the fans. It's great for both of their careers. And it's just probably one of the best matchups to make. But personally, I think the easiest matchup to make for the matchmakers, if you want an easy fight night to make sometime in November, if you need to fill up a card, I think an easy main event to get for a shitty fight night would be a Holly Holm versus Jermaine Durandame 2 rematch. A 5-round main event. These two girls fighting. This time it's not for a title, but it's for title implications. Whoever wins gets another shot at the bantamweight crown against the almighty mother, Amanda Nunes. Yeah, that's another thing. Amanda Nunes is a mother now, and that scares me for so many reasons. And it all just kind of boils down into one big reason, which is the violence that's going to ensue after. Because her motherly instincts are going to come out. She's going to become a way harsher fighter, a much more better fighter. She's got way more purpose to train and fight now. It's not just, I'm fighting for legacy now. It's, I'm fighting for my wife and child. So, you want to see that. I'm excited to see Amanda Nunes return after this birth of her child. This is awesome. So there's so many matchups to make, but definitely those two in particular I'd love to make, and put Irina Aldana and Juliana Pena against each other. It would be a great fight on a prelims or a main card of a fight night. Definitely a good fight for both of those. And like I said, definitely put GDR and Holly Holm in the rematch. That is definitely the fight to make if we're going to have Amanda Nunes defending her featherweight belt. I believe she is anyway. That's it. That's all for this week's podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. I hope you guys enjoyed last week's podcast and the interview that I had with it. And just let me know who you'd like to have on the podcast. But anyway, I'll see you guys later. Peace.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.